I told you that Native Americans were not of Asian descent, but they were actually of African descent. Yes, some people do believe that the Native Americans of the North, South, and Central America were actually of African descent and that they were the first people whenever Christopher Columbus sailed to what we now know as the United States and places like South America. I'm Austin Holloman. We're going to break it down and I'm going to tell you if I disagree or agree with this theory. I know a lot of people will have a lot to say in the comments, and I hope to read your comments because there's some people that think that the slave trade never happened. Now, I think that's ridiculous to even say, but we're going to go down through the facts on both sides on why one side believes what each side believes. Let's get into it. Make sure you like and subscribe. Now, the belief that Native Americans were actually of African descent comes from oral tradition, colonial record manipulation, and a desire to reclaim identity. And if you guys don't know or have not noticed, a lot of Black Americans, for some reason, not all, let me make sure that's clear, a lot of Black Americans seem to want to disconnect themselves and not identify with the continent of Africa, which is absolutely insane. Because if you want to say that the Native Americans were Black and of African descent, how the hell can you not be connected to the continent of Africa? But we'll get into that later on. People like Ivan Van Sertima and Dan Colloway say Africans either reached America first or they were already here and they never left. And I've done my research to figure out what are their speculations on how Africans got from Africa to places like the United States, because on the opposite side, the Asians that they claim made it to the Americas it made a lot more sense based off what they said, with them walking through Siberia, through Alaska, and then down through South America. And I'm going to use my personal travel experience to tell you why I believe at least some or about half of the Native American population is coming through that route that science has taught us. So according to confirmed science, Native Americans came to the Americas over 15,000 years ago through Siberia and Alaska. And there's even DNA that has connected Siberians and East Asians to people in the Americas, and ancient sites like Clovis and Monteverde support these theories. The remains of the ancestry that were found in Montana had pure Asian DNA and no signs of African ancestry. Now, I'm going to tell you guys from my experiences being in Latin America for over a year. I went to 8 different countries in Latin America. And I can tell you, based off of the science that they have provided with DNA, et cetera, all this stuff, right? They claim that they walked through Alaska all the way down to the tip, down to Argentina, as far down as they can go, correct? Now, if you guys were watching me whenever I was in places like Santa Cruz, Bolivia, Santiago, Chile, and even Lima, Peru, and Cusco, Peru, if you go back and look at those vlogs, and matter of fact, go look at the vlog where I was in my Ghana jersey. Jason and I went to a small town right outside of Santa Cruz. Those people looked anything but African, and they actually did look like they were from Thailand or Malaysia, somewhere in Southeast Asia. They had way more East Asian features than they did African. Now, if you want to go back to the Native Americans that are in the United States, half of those Native Americans look white, and then the other half look like they have a mixture of African genes and those same Native American genes that walk through Siberia. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and get to the next point. Now, for the other side, the African theory that a lot of people seem to believe nowadays say that Africans came to the Americas by boat before Christopher Columbus. The evidence that they would use to support this claim is West African currents at that time could carry ships directly to South America, and Mali and Carthaginian empires were advanced enough at that time in navigation and trade to make a trip across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. One example of this is Emperor Abu Bakr II of Mali reportedly sent 2,000 ships west in the year 1311, but these ships vanished, and some believe that somehow they landed in the Americas. And we can debate that because these same people that have this theory that we were already there don't believe that the slave trade ever happened. They don't ever believe that slaves were brought from West Africa and Southeast Africa to the United States. And their claim for supporting that is there's no more ships left. There's no slave ships left. Okay, well, you can't say that and then you use supporting evidence from somebody that so-called sent 2,000 ships, but there's no evidence of that either. So you can't say both of those don't exist. Let's just start there. And they have another stronger way of supporting this than those other two I just named, which was with the Moors. The Moors were actually Arabs that actually went through and colonized a lot of North Africa and even as far as Spain and Portugal, or also known as the Iberian Peninsula. And they did very much develop that peninsula into a way that the rest of Europe was still behind. For example, they had put street lights in the Iberian Peninsula, and even London at that time was still sitting in darkness and they hadn't developed street lights. So that is a strong claim to say that these people were technologically advanced enough at that time to sail to the Americas to be the first there, per se. To elaborate further on that, they believe that these Moors arrived from Spain in the Americas before 1492. There were claims of Arabic inscriptions in Brazil and the state of Mississippi. The Moors had oceanic knowledge and trade links across the Atlantic, and I would love to see further proof of that. If you have proof of that, correct me down in the comments. Believers cite old maps showing the Americas before Columbus, some allegedly of Moorish origin. Now, I can confirm that is a very wonder of the world belief. The same way how you have pyramids in Egypt and then you have pyramids like the Mayan civilization. There's pretty much links from around the world. Now, some people say that this is aliens, but it could have just been that Africans did travel to different parts of the world, like the Americas, and had similar infrastructure. I don't know. They had something similar about them where somehow they built similar pyramids and worshiped gods in very similar ways at that time. Now, let's elaborate on the second part. The "we were here already" theory that a lot of Black Americans seem to have today. Furthermore, Black Americans are the original Americans, and they were mislabeled as Africans, is what these people seem to believe. Records from the 1800s often swapped Indians for the word Negro whenever they were labeling what they perceived to be Native Americans at that time. Slave numbers may have been inflated to hide indigenous origins. Dan Calloway says that 98% of Black Americans are indigenous, which I strongly disagree with that. DNA does not agree with this statement at all, but people still relate to the message. Now, the reason that I think some Black Americans believe this is because slaves that would escape would often intermarry with indigenous populations. And keep in mind that for them to label Indians as Negroes is probably, I think it was actually a step up in society from them. Because if you ask me, the Native Americans had it way worse than being Black in America. Why do I say that? They wiped them off the damn continent. The North American, they pretty much got rid of them. They make up less than 1% of the American population to this day. I mean, at least we're still relevant to some degree. Now, when I look at my family tree, a lot of Black Americans do have this belief that they had a grandmother or somebody in their family that intermarried with the African slaves and was able to make them this different sort of Black American the reason why we're different. And you can tell that there is a difference between most Black Americans and Africans. And you can look at these people and yes, they are clearly Black. I mean, they produce me. I mean, only Black people have this kind of nose. But anyway, you can clearly tell that they're Black, but you can also tell down the line that there's something different in their face. There's something different in their eyes, and there is something different about their hair. There's something different about a lot of Black Americans, and we'll get further into why that may be. Now, that being said, I am not considering myself disconnected from the African continent. That would be very foolish of me to say that, considering the fact out of the 9 countries I've been to, I've seen numerous times, at least a dozen times, people that look exactly like the Black people I knew growing up. Like, all I had to do was, if I called the person's name, I would just expect them to turn around and respond, because that's how identical they were. So I'm not buying that bullshit of we're not from Africa at all. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Okay, now let's look at some biblical theories on this subject. Some spiritual groups say that Black Americans are the true Israelites or Asiatics. So Hebrew Israelites interpret Deuteronomy 28 as proof to support this claims that they are the true Israelites or Asiatics. And I have heard people say that Black Jews are the original Jews, and that we can make a whole nother video about that. I'll let you guys talk about that in the comments. Moorish science temple teachings claim that America is our true homeland, and many believe that the transatlantic slave trade was divine punishment, but that Black Americans were native to this world. I would love for them to elaborate more on how that's divine punishment. Now, to go into the modern day era, the way how things are proven, which can be bullshitted. I will agree with you that science can be, just because something is a statistic does not mean that it's true. For example, whenever they were trying to make weed legal in the United States, somehow weed was you could survive getting shot by a damn RPG if you smoked a blunt, if you read the science. Weed was the cure to everything. I think that's bullshit. But anyway, DNA is how we prove things in 2025. And scientific DNA points to Asia, not Africa, for Native American ancestry. Genome studies show no sub-Saharan markers before the year 1492. Lucia skull looked African, but the genetics did not match African genes. And this is why I brought up the DNA could be bullshitted. I don't know if there's too many skulls that look like Black people's skulls, but anyway, that could be falsified information. I'll let you guys debate that in the comments. The Kennewick man, who was thought to be European, turned out to be 100% Native American, just to prove further with DNA and identity. This theory may have also been brought about during the reclassification of people during slavery. Many people during slavery were legally stripped of Native American identity and labeled as Black, Negro, as I said before. Virginia's Walter Plecker erased indigenous names from vital records, and other states use Negro as any catch-all non-white person. Tribes like the Pamunkey had to fight for recognition after being labeled colored for decades, which could have led to an identity crisis. Now, that being said, like I said in my family tree, I believe and I know for a fact that we have intermingled with Native Americans. We do have Native American blood. Regardless of the origin of either group, Black and Native Americans share deep ties with each other, especially when it came to discrimination in the United States and in Latin America. Do you guys remember in the last video when I said that they were trying to whitewash Latin America? In Peru, they sterilized around 5,000 Native American women to whitewash that population and the other things they did to Black people. And you can go watch that video for yourself. More often than not, Native Americans lived together with Black Americans or African slaves, and they both resisted against slavery and formed mixed families, as I said before. Communities like the Black Seminoles are proof of that unity, and I'll show you what that looks like here. The Cherokee freedmen, which were descendants of enslaved Blacks, fought for tribal citizenship they were promised. And a lot of Black Americans do claim that they have Cherokee ancestry in their family line. And a lot of people don't understand that even groups like the Irish and the Sicilians became intermingled with Black Americans by living in the same neighborhoods and facing very similar discrimination. Now, I'm not saying that they had more discrimination, but I'm just saying things were very similar. You can even see photos of the Ku Klux Klan hanging a Black American and an Irish or an Italian person next to the Black American. Just FYI, because some of y'all don't know that. Now, why does this debate matter? It matters because it's not about history. It's about people that want to find their stolen identity. They want to heal themselves. I don't know. They need something to connect to. But a good half of that other population just wants to disconnect themselves from the continent of Africa and establish a racial hierarchy of being Black. Oral traditions matter just as much as the academic citations, and you can confirm that by the theory that there was nothing in sub-Saharan Africa when the Europeans got here. That's because a lot of sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't really write a lot of things. They just passed things down orally by mouth through generations. And so it was easier for the Europeans to come here and just level out the land and say that nothing was there because there was no written documents of those things either. And for some people, this theory is about restoring what slavery and colonization tried to erase from American history. So to close out, what does Austin Holloman believe actually happened with Native Americans, Asians, and Africans? what is my theory on what I believe? I 100%, without needing any verification, believe that Native Americans came from Siberia or East Asia, Siberia, wherever they put it like this. They walked through Asia, through Alaska, and they walked down to Latin America as far as the bottom of Argentina. Why do I believe that again? Because I've been to damn near all those countries in South America, and I can tell you that the people that are considered native in those populations look very Asian. On the flip side, there are some very native mixed with African mixed looking people in Mississippi, where I have family from Macomb, Mississippi. I have family from New Orleans. I have family from all throughout the South, and they do have Native American in their blood based off of looking at their facial features. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm Austin Holloman. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you learned something, give the video a like, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.